From the AirTech Heating Studios, a Born to Win media production. Welcome to the resurrection of Say It Like You See It.
Super Bowl 57 is set, and we are locked and loaded on a Tuesday, live from the AirTech Heating Studios here in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. My name is Trace the Moose Moustakis. This is Say It Like You See It, alongside my partner in crime, the always better half, Quinn, the mighty Q. Sir, how are you today?
Hey, it's Tuesday. It's the only day we got. We're rocking and rolling, and I'm loving it. Let's get after it.
Let's get after it indeed. All right, so like we said, Super Bowl 57 is set. The Philadelphia Eagles will take on the Kansas City Chiefs in Arizona 2 Sundays from now. So not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after that. We got to talk about a lot of things. A lot of football was played this weekend, a lot of really upset fans, and a lot of realizations that I believe came to fruition, and some things that we need to talk about have been cemented in legacy. Let's start, though, of course, with the very first game that we saw Sunday afternoon. The Eagles and the 49ers, not really much of a game, actually, if you want to call it that. Let's start with you, Mighty Q. What did you see?
What I saw was honestly a Eagles team that was pretty dominant throughout. It was a very effective effort done on their part on the defensive side. But realistically, with the 49ers, it almost seemed like they weren't physically ready for the game, as the fact of they're a very physical team and they just didn't control the Eagles defensive line. They have a great offensive line, but yet they schemed poorly in the effect of, using tight ends to block defensive ends, which is always a terrible decision. As we saw, Brock Purdy got hurt in the first series, and pretty much after that happened, it seemed like it kind of took all the air out of the sails for the 49ers. So I'm not really going to say that I think the Eagles played in a dominating fashion. They played a Giants team off of a huge, energetic, high energy type win for them. And then this week, they got after it. They were locked in. They were ready to go. I'm not saying that they were ill prepared or they're not a good team, but essentially Purdy got hurt. You're now talking about Josh Johnson coming in, a guy who's been on 10 teams in the NFL and has started 9 games. So I actually don't even think he's actually started 9 games in that amount. I think he's played in 9 games. It's a career that is a journeyman. The dude is a lifelong practice squad player. Like he's not even a backup. He's a practice squad quarterback. So you're asking already a big task in Brock Purdy is, a rookie who's played 9 games, 10 games, or whatever that number ends up being. I forget which exact week he came in, but he had a large task on his shoulder. You were already asking the 49ers to essentially carry past that because it's, a rookie's never made it to the Super Bowl for that reason. And now you're asking a guy who's a 4th string, career-long practice squad quarterback to try to come in and save the day in the largest spot. He doesn't regularly throw the football. He has no communication with the receivers. But now he has no communications in terms of checks. He's a career-long practice squad guy for a reason. He doesn't know the reads. He doesn't know the defenses. He probably didn't prep and wasn't nearly as ready for this game as he needed to be. And then what ends up happening is he ends up getting hurt. And then you have Brock Purdy, who ends up coming back on the field. We now know he has a torn UCL. So he's going to end up needing a severe surgery. He's out for at least the earliest 6 months, more like 9 to 12. So he could be done entirely for next year in terms of looking ahead for the 49ers. But on the Eagles side, honestly, their offense really isn't that good. I think Jalen Hurts is actually more hurt than anything. This 2 weeks off could be very important for him in terms of getting as healthy as he can. But at the end of the day, it was a pretty lackluster game in terms of energy wise. We saw at the end, a little scrap and guys definitely saying things, and that is what kind of led to most of it. But realistically, it was honestly a really boring game. It was a game that once Purdy went out, it was we knew. It was like I literally got 3 different text messages from people that were just like, well, there's the game. That's it. Like he got hurt, it's over. Like no one else is coming in. And then you had Jimmy G just smiling along. So I don't know. Lackluster game. I don't think the Eagles played great, but I mean, it's more about how the 49ers kind of actually crumbled.
Well, so I believe a couple of things after watching this game. Number one, let me start with the positives, right? Because you don't want to start on the negative for the 49ers. I'll get to them in a second. But the Eagles, doesn't it feel like every single time the Eagles have these championship runs, everything goes their way? Am I right? Like Carson Wentz goes down in 2017, 2018. Nick Foles comes in and plays probably the best career backup football any quarterback has played ever. I mean, he goes in and he wins like 7 straight games, beats Brady in the Super Bowl, hoists the trophy, and they make a statue in Philadelphia. Simultaneously, this year in 2022, everything has gone the Eagles' way. Everything. They've picked up key free agent players. They had according to Pro Football Focus, this is not a joke. You can look this up. They had the easiest graded schedule in the entire NFL, and it wasn't even close. So they had this cakewalk schedule. The hardest team, the most difficult team that they beat, believe it or not, in the year was the Dallas Cowboys. According to like overall records, the Dallas Cowboys was the hardest team they beat. And you saw what happened to Dallas at the hands of the 49ers. They got shellacked. So I think that the Eagles have finally had this perfect storm of things that happened to their team this year, where right now they're just looking at it saying, this has to be the year. Everything has gone right. Why not now? I do agree with you. I don't know if this is a dynasty in the making. I think this might just be one really good year. I saw a lot of really bad signs from the Eagles offense. They didn't click early on in the game. Struggle. Jalen Hurts is obviously hurt. There's no question about that at all. You can just watch in the way he plays, the way he throws. There's not enough oomph behind the ball. He's probably playing at about 75 to 80%. But is he good enough to play? Is he good enough to start? Is he good enough to use his legs? Of course he is. But there's a lot of sloppy play. And I think the biggest thing that happened, why the Eagles won in such a dominating fashion, is because exactly like you said, as soon as Brock Purdy went out, the 49ers just gave up. They were like, it's done. Everybody knew it. They knew it. They knew as soon as he went out and he couldn't throw a football more than, 3 yards, they said that's the season. I mean, and this is 49er football, right? They always have injuries. Jimmy G is a career injury player. Trey Lance goes down second game of the year. Then Purdy, tears his UCL. And then Josh Johnson, of course, the last quarterback on the roster, someone that doesn't give them any hope, but literally is a warm body, goes out with a concussion. I mean, this is just the way it goes for the 49ers. I feel really, really bad for Kyle Shanahan because I believe he's one of the smartest, if not the smartest head coach in the entire league offensively. It's just one of those things where you got to look at it and say, you've got to get a guy in there that's reliable, right? Not even necessarily someone who's a superstar. Get Kirk Cousins. Seriously, get Kirk Cousins. Get Mac Jones. Get, someone that doesn't have these career injuries. Derek Carr would be another great example of someone you could get. Someone that just can literally stand up 16 games is what the 49ers need. And if they can get that, I promise you, they're going to win a Super Bowl very, very soon. The pieces around them are just too good. I thought Hassan Reddick was great for the Eagles. I thought the defensive line for the Eagles is their number one strong suit. They get after the quarterback like nobody's business. How long is that going to last for? Only time can tell, because you got guys that are going to want their money. There's going to be guys that leave in free agency. You just don't know. But right now, it's the perfect storm. And right now, I believe truly the Eagles are a really, really hot team, especially one that might have Kansas City shaking just a little bit in their boots going into 2 Sundays from now.
I don't know in terms of if they're really shaking about it, just based on the fact of we saw, as if once we get into the game, we'll kind of talk about it a little bit more. But the main focus for the Eagles is their defensive line. And after what we saw on Sunday from the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes had a decent amount of time to throw. I'm going to go ahead and make an early prediction. I like the Chiefs in this game, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. We know that we've got a bunch of time to talk about it and get into that more, but earliest prediction of it, I don't think the Chiefs need to be as worried. I think if they come in prepared, I think they have the not that it's going to be easy.
They have the Mahomes.
I think it's if the Chiefs lose this game, it's definitely going to be because the Chiefs lost. Like it's the Chiefs game to lose at this point.
Yeah, I obviously Friday's show is going to be a lot more of a deep dive into the Super Bowl. Sorry, the big game. We can't say that. Trademark, trademark purposes. But let's get in before we preview anything. Let's talk about what we saw Sunday night. A game that I believe truly in the first half was kind of boring, and then the second half just got really, really good. It was Burrow versus Mahomes, the two best quarterbacks in the league. I've got a lot to say about this, and I drew one of the ultimate conclusions, probably the most set in stone conclusion and opinions and takes that I've ever had in my entire life watching football, and I've been watching since 2006. I can tell you this with certainty, but I'm not going to get into it yet. That is coming up for my opinion, my little rant later. Let's start with you, Quinn. What did you see from this game?
Honestly, from what I'm seeing from this game is something that I'll kind of say to you, because I know that you were real big on the fact of, Burrow is this argument that he could be better than Patrick Mahomes. And the Bengals had honestly talked all week. They beat the Bills. They go into Buffalo. They absolutely destroy the Bills. They played just a complete game. The Bills were completely disorganized. They were literally only going for home run shots, came in with one of the dumbest game plans I've ever seen. Now you run into a team who has Andy Reid, who has a good offensive scheme, and has the best player in football. The Chiefs were the better team. The Chiefs had all the better plays. The Chiefs had more time of possession. The Chiefs had more yards. The Chiefs had the better quarterback in the game. At the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes, 29 completions on 43 attempts, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns. His only mistake was that weird, fumble thing where, the ball just slipped out of his hands. I think he was trying to throw the ball before he even had it. I don't think he ever even had a grip. When they showed it in slow motion, I was just like, oh, he was literally trying to throw the ball before he even caught the snap. It was that lined up of a play for them. They had it schemed out that well. So to see a guy play at a level of not just, hey, he's the face of the NFL, but to come in and capitalize and to play in a game that he's on one leg. High ankle sprains are no joke. He made a couple plays with his legs that completely changed the way this game going out. Yes, the Bengals played better in the second half to a degree, but at the end of the day, the Chiefs played pretty consistent from the start. Yes, it was kind of boring, and then we got down late. Patrick Mahomes made better plays. The Chiefs offense looked better. They were moving the ball more consistently. They got more first downs. They were better on third down. The Chiefs were the better team on Sunday. So I know what everyone wants to say. Oh, it was the refs. Oh my gosh. I just can't with the refs. I don't care. Oh, well, they were given a free third down play. Okay. And the Bengals defense didn't stop them. They committed their own penalty. That was a clear penalty. And it's okay, there's a first down. We showed on the replay, the ref was running from all the way in the back corner, trying to stop the play. It's not like the play was supposed to happen. It was trying to be stopped. So this whole, this is just terrible officiating. It's blown calls. No, it's pretty clear and evident. Well, Joe Burrow should have had, a call. Look at the NBA. The refs inevitably swallow whistles in big games because really, for their most part, they don't want to try to be influenced in the game. There's a lot of times that people complain where it's how is there not penalties? It's because it's the postseason. Refs don't want to throw the flag. Refs are out there watching the game just as much as the rest of us. Yes, there's times where it's big plays and big wherever moments. Oh, he pushed him out of downs. Yeah. Say he had a great game. He had an absolute great game and made one mistake at the end of the game. And now everyone's like, it's his fault. It's his fault. And it's the ref's fault. It's neither of those. The Bengals didn't play a collective game. And in the real scheme, Joe Burrow had 2 terrible interceptions. And more importantly, it took a big play on 4th down and a big play on 3rd down for the Bengals to even be in the game. You throw a double move on 4th and 3 to Jamar Chase as a ball that the safety, if he just turns around, is a pick. And to the same for the ball that goes to T. Higgins. A non-rookie corner turns his head around and is in the NFL for some years. That's also a pick. So in this whole, the Bengals should have won. No, they weren't. They weren't a better team. They didn't play better. The Chiefs outplayed them in almost every single aspect of the game. I don't care about a call by the refs of, well, they just blew the game. No, they didn't. You can make one play or a second play, and if you really want to go back through all of it, the Chiefs made a majority of the big plays, and every main stat point. It's the Chiefs that played better, and that's the reason they're going to the Super Bowl, because the Bengals thought that they won they thought that they won last week. They thought it was everything. They beat the Bills. It's on to Burrowhead. Well, you ran into the real players in Arrowhead, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay, so before I launch on this, I will address one thing that you were talking about, and that's the refs. I agree with you to an extent. I believe that you can't blame the refs, but I can say this. You can go back to at least 3 plays, and I'll lay them out later in the show because we're going to get into it. It's actually one of our segments coming up. There are 3 plays specifically that the refs missed entirely. And these aren't even like ticky-tacky, could go either way calls. No, these were blatant calls that should have been called that would have helped the Bengals in, progress the game a little bit further and actually give them a shot. But before I get to that, let me just say this. I believe 2 things can be simultaneously true at the exact same time. I believe that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. And I also believe the Bengals should have won this game. The Bengals, let me just tell you this. They gave up more sacks, had less first downs, didn't have near the running game. Joe Mixon played bad. They had a collapsing offensive line. Burrow was running for his life. He was obviously freezing. They didn't get the calls they were supposed to get to. And they still took it to where Kansas City had to have a game-winning field goal at the end of the game. This Cincinnati team is a dynasty in the making. Now, there's a difference. Kansas City's already a dynasty. Mahomes, 5 straight AFC championships, 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years? I mean, the dude is just, he's the greatest thing. He's the greatest player to ever throw a football. That's just period, bottom line. And I kind of was testing the narrative last week because truthfully, with the year that Joe Burrow's had and sort of this 11-game win streak that they've been on, Joe Burrow has made his case where, hey, look, I'm right up there. It's Mahomes and then it's me. And people for a long time, it was Josh Allen. No, it's Burrow. He's number 2. But you could clearly see there's a large difference. I mean, Burrow's great. I love Burrow, and I think he's going to have a Hall of Fame career, and I think he's going to win a couple of Super Bowls. He's nothing like Mahomes. Mahomes to do it on one leg, essentially the entire game. You saw him hobbling. You saw him limping. And to go out and give that stat line is something that most quarterbacks, when healthy, only wish they could do. Daniel Jones wishes he could have that line against the Bengals. And Mahomes did it on one leg. He made He made Marquez Valdez-Scantling look like an all-pro. And we know from his days in Green Bay, that guy couldn't catch a cold in a freaking ice storm. I mean, it was unprecedented in the sense of what he was facing with how little he faced it with. I mean, think about it. Kelsey was hurt. Kadarius Toney went out. Tyreek Hill's gone. Juju Smith-Schuster was basically invisible the entire game. He had no run game, and yet he still came out and put up massive numbers. Mahomes is the greatest thing to ever throw a football. Period. End of story. Etch it in stone. I mean, I think if he didn't play a single snap for the rest of his entire career, the rest of his life, he's still a top 3 quarterback that we've ever seen. Now, let me get into this a little bit before I don't want to get too in depth with it because, like I said, it's one of our upcoming topics. In fact, I've kind of delved a little bit too much into it. The Bengals should have won this game. They played almost perfect football in the 4th quarter and just got shafted in every other play. There was a play where that punt that they got when they stopped after that extra play that you were talking about, where the ref was trying to blow the whistle. They actually didn't do anything that drive. They got called out after that 1st and 10 after the hold or the pass interference that Eli Apple was holding. They actually had to punt that. There was one of the defenders for the Bengals got a block in the back, no call, where he was literally standing with his back facing, and I'm not really doing a great job of explaining this, but it was the most egregious block in the back call I've ever seen in my life. The Chiefs player literally shoved him straight in the back and knocked him down. Guy gets up, looks for the penalty. There is none. Now, I agree. You want to swallow the whistle, right? Because you want to see good football. You want to see the game being played. You don't like stoppages of play. But when there's an egregious call like that, you have to make the call. And I believe the Bengals should have won this game. They played really, really good football in the second half, and that fourth quarter was spectacular. Joe Burrow, other than the one pick he threw earlier in the game, was dynamite that second half. Again, as soon as, it came down to essentially who's going to have the ball last. And you're right. Osai made one mistake. He made one mistake for the entire game, played great. And he just happened to make it at the wrong time. And that's what happened. I'm not saying that Kansas City didn't deserve to win. They played a great game too, but I think Cincinnati should have won.
Yeah, I'm only gonna have to you started down that road. So Kadarius Toney went out, McCole Hardman went out, Juju went out, Kelsey was off the field. That's all 4 of their starting receivers were off the field at one point. Also with an injured Mahomes, also with a non-existent run game. Yes, it was better than the Bengals, but it also still wasn't there. So to say, oh, the Bengals really played better. No, the Bengals did not play better. The Bengals had less first downs. The Bengals had 11 drives versus the Chiefs 10, and they didn't do anything with it. In terms of the fourth quarter, and what the Bengals did in the fourth quarter, they scored at the beginning of the fourth quarter based off of that fourth down call that they had to Jamar Chase that literally should have been a pick. And then you had a 2-yard Samaje Perine touchdown. And then after that, they didn't really sniff scoring. They had 2 drives in the fourth quarter, and they did not look that good. So I don't know what game you had seen in the fourth quarter, but the Bengals didn't really look that impressive in the fourth. Yes, I get it on a couple calls. Yes, I get it.
Your offense doesn't have to score in order to play great football. Their defense was fantastic. I believe the only points that the Chiefs scored in the fourth quarter.
It wasn't as fantastic as you're making it out to be. The fact that Patrick Mahomes is playing with backup players and backup receivers, and they even move the ball. The fact that they moved the ball and were even to score in the fourth quarter at that point of the game with those players, every single one of those Bengal defenders should be better than the Chiefs on offense. We're talking about rookies and guys who have literally before they came into the game had more tackles than receptions. And we're talking about the fact that the Bengals were the Chiefs were the better in this game. The Bengals did not play. Yes, I get it on the punt. I get it with the block in the back. But with what refs are doing in terms of the line judge that's running down, the first look is, okay, what's going on initially right off when the gunners are headed down the field, if they're being pushed out, if they have to drop the hat. But from that point, they then are turning and looking at the returner, because a lot of things that are going to happen at the point of attack. If I remember where the ref had run to at that point, he was already past and would have already been past that line of sight, would have been more looking at the returner than he was at the gunners at that point. Because it was at the same time, that last punt was a ball kicked into the middle of the field. That was a low line drive punt. And as soon as it came off his foot, I was like, oh, that's a low punt. That's a really low punt. And it was no hang time. He catches it. He had the entire field to work with at that point. So because I think it being a low punt, if it was a high hang time punt, I guarantee you they probably throw the flag, because it gave the ref time to actually see it. I don't think because it had no hang time and he had already caught it and where it had happened and when that penalty would have happened in that line. Yes, I get it. It's a missed call, but you can't you can't put it on and say, oh, well, it's, they should have won the game. I don't have any reason to tell me that the Bengals should have won this game. They weren't as effective on third down. They didn't move the ball effectively the entire game. Joe Burrow wasn't nearly as accurate. Their offense wasn't running any of the same scheme that they had run against the Bills. And to the point, all the way up until the fourth quarter, you're right. It was a tie ball game, but it was only a tie ball game based on the fact that they did go and score after Patrick Mahomes had one of the worst turnovers that we saw. And it was a complete mistake. That was his one mistake of the game. And from that point, if you take that one play out of the game, the Chiefs win that game going away. Like, so just because Patrick Mahomes made a mistake and the game was then made close, it's like they were outright winning the game and on a drive to score again. And the game, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't make that play and doesn't put doesn't put the Bengals back in the game, they probably go down and score. It's now a 2-score game. The game's irrelevant.
Well, you can't say that because you never know. The next play could have been a pick, and the next play could have been another fumble. You have no idea.
You're right. So to the same credit, Joe Burrow could have thrown a touchdown on one of those plays. Joe Burrow could have done this. So we're arguing on a hypothetical. I'm arguing based off of what actually happened. The Bengals had 11 drives. The Chiefs had 10. The Chiefs had 66 total plays. The Bengals only had 63 for a grand total of 309 yards versus 357 by the Chiefs. Joe Burrow had 2 picks and was sacked 5 times, and that's on his offensive line. I get that. But that accrued for a loss of 32 yards. So now you're under that 300-yard thresh mark. And so we want to look at passing first downs. Okay, the Bengals had 11. The Chiefs had 17. We want to look at rushing first downs. Okay, the Bengals did edge them in that category. It was 6-3. Where are we saying that these teams had completely different games here? The Chiefs were better as a whole. The Bengals made some mistakes. Joe Burrow made some mistakes. The running backs made some mistakes. The offensive line made mistakes. The defense had a couple holes and a couple mistakes. In the grand scheme of who played collectively a better game, it's obvious and shows and is clear the Chiefs played a better whole game. Yes, okay, they got a call or two. It happens in every game. You can go back and look at every single game and you can say, this is terrible. This was a brutal call. We should have never gotten that. I guarantee you there's 1 to 3 a game every single time. And at the end of the day, you can't leave it up to the refs.
No, I agree with that. No, I completely agree with that. And I don't blame the refs for the Cincinnati Bengals loss. What I'm saying is, if those calls go the other way, you're looking at an entirely different scheme, because a lot of those calls that weren't called, those no calls, pushed the Bengals back all the way back into their own territory deep. We're talking sub 20-yard line. There was one, for example, that one no call, the roughing the passer on Joe Burrow. They were on their own 8. So you obviously get a little bit more breathing room. The playbook opens up a little bit when you have more room to work with. So I'm not saying that the game would have gone different. It absolutely, though, shifts the tide in terms of how you attack the Chiefs defense. Because the Chiefs basically look at that and go, okay, now it's 3rd and 10. There's a no call there. Now we're just going to send the house. And now what do you have to do? You have to do a quick little check down, or you have to go deep downfield, which Burrow did, and he threw a pick. So, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There are different ways that you would attack that defense rather than doing what you did, that monster bomb to T. Higgins, which, by the way, I don't think anybody thought that was oh my God, we have to launch this football down there. The only reason they did that was because, 1, the offensive line played like shit, and 2, they were well, if we're going to turn this ball over, we might as well turn it over all the way down the field, like you've said, like a punt. So it was literally just this Hail Mary type throw, hey, if we catch it, great, we got lucky. If not, they get the ball. He put so much loft under that football. It was clear what he was doing. It was a 50-50, go up, try to make a play. There was no chance in hell that was a design play hey, we think this is actually going to work. So I'm not saying the refs made this call or ruined this game, and that's the reason that the Bengals lost. But it's certainly attributed to, okay, now we have to get a little bit more conservative with the way that we play.
1 for 3 in the red zone versus 2 for 3 in the red zone that the Chiefs had. At the end of the day, the difference of penalties was a grand total of 16 yards. That's the difference in penalties in this game, is a grand total of 16 yards that the Bengals had of extra negative yardage that the Chiefs didn't. So do we really want to talk about a game where 16 yards makes a difference? It's the grand scheme of the game. You're right. The Bengals offensive line played terrible. Even if they get that roughing the passer call, you think that they're magically going to play better? You think that the pass rush, awesome, that was awesome the entire game, now isn't going to get to Joe Burrow? You think he's not magically going to be pressured? Like, just because they had a no call on the goal line doesn't then mean that the very next play, it wasn't going to be more pressure. Like, as a whole, the offensive line played terrible. Joe Burrow had some mistakes that he normally doesn't have. The rushing game was actually better than the Chiefs, but it still was very low compared to what it normally is for them. And their defense had just a few mistakes that they allowed in, because the fact of backups against your starters in the AFC Championship game and you can't rise to the occasion, that's where it's like you can make a lot of excuses, but like,
listen,
it's down to football at this point.
And I'm going to go back to what I started this with. I believe Mahomes played easily one of his 2 or 3 best performances.
I think this one takes only now, because like the other ones that he played great, he still had a great supporting cast.
Correct.
This game, no supporting cast. You want to talk about no rush game from the Bengals? The Chiefs averaged 2.1 yards a rush in this game.
That's dog water.
2.1 for a grand total of 42 yards. You want to talk about putting the team on your... Mahomes said, hey guys, look, I have one leg. There's no one out here playing. Hop on. Come on. You guys want to go back to the Super Bowl? Because I do. It's been 5 years that he's a starter in the NFL. So let's look at Mahomes. You've mentioned it, so I think we can probably shift this into a Mahomes conversation now. Patrick Mahomes has started and played 5 years in the NFL. Those 5 years that he's played in the NFL, all 5, he's made it to the AFC Championship game as the number 1 seed, playing in home at Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. He's now made it to his 3rd Super Bowl, and his 2 losses came to Tom Brady in overtime and came to Joe Burrow last year in overtime. And that game loss in overtime was the fact that I will get it to their credit. They did get the ball first and they didn't go down and score, but they're also still coming off that giant win that week before against the Bills. So like in terms of like energy levels and what things are going on, like the Chiefs came in with a lot on that game. But so at the end of the day, 5 years, 5 AFC championships, all at home, his 3rd Super Bowl. He's on route to his 2nd MVP. And if they win the Super Bowl, he's almost guaranteed the Super Bowl MVP. So he's about to be 2 for 3 with 2 MVPs, 2 league MVPs, and 5 AFC championships on his back. Like at this point, you said it. I mean, he is the best person to throw the football. He is the most talented person. He is the GOAT. Everyone wants to make this argument. I get it. Brady has 7 rings. Brady has been dominant. Brady was dominant for the beginning of the 10 years in New England, and then at the end of the 10 years, like he won, what was it, like 4 and 6 years or something like that? Like it was something ridiculous. Of like it was just like, all right, well, Tom's just going to win every other one. Patrick Mahomes is doing that at a better level. He's thrown more touchdowns in that short span because Tom Brady didn't start his rookie year either. He's thrown, I think, 60 more touchdowns than Brady has, with almost 20 less interceptions and 8,000 more yards.
Well, okay. Let me play devil's advocate. I'm not going to disagree with you, but let me just say this: it's a different game.
That is correct.
It's a way different game. I mean, it was
completely
run centric until at least 2017.
That's correct. Everyone wants to, everyone talks about GOAT conversations. And then like the biggest thing for LeBron is like, well, and then people, has 6 rings. And it's like, okay, well, if we want to make it championships, Bill Russell has the most.
Right.
But like no one makes that argument.
Correct.
MJ was the best overall player, like in total, overall at his position and what he does. Like there's a reason MJ's the GOAT, and like every person that watched MJ play has like very long list of reasons of like bullet points, stat to back it up, and then compare it to LeBron, clutchness, ability, all these other things that go attributes to that, supporting cast. Mahomes has now done it. And I think this is also a credit to the Bengals. And I know how you mentioned them in a dynasty, and I'll mention this also with the Chiefs. The Bengals have the 5th most cap space next year. The Chiefs are 8th on that list. So they're already in a dynasty. They've already got Mahomes on contract for another handful of years. So they're good. They've got him on the discount. Where's anybody going to come in to stop them? They're 8th in terms of salary cap, which means that they can go out and get more talent. And the fact that they had 6 rookies on their team that were starting this year, 6, and they just made it to the Super Bowl. So in terms of a dynasty and stopping them, they're in a very good position to kind of make themselves like, hey, we just made it to the Super Bowl and we're about to make ourselves a lot better because we've got the 8th most cap space in the league. That's pretty solid.
So one thing that you mentioned, I believe there's a stark difference between the greatest to ever do something and who has the greatest career. If you look at this objectively, who would you say, like if I just asked you straight up, who's a better quarterback, John Elway or Steve Young? What would you say? If you have to even think about it,
Elway.
It's Elway. Elway's going to be a top 6, top 7 quarterback to ever play. Elway's got 2 Super Bowls. Steve Young has 3. So if we're going by the rings argument, Steve Young is a better quarterback than John Elway. Well, no, because there's a lot more to that. You have to add some context into it. Now,
but I think with those two that you compared, though, like in terms of like those two, it's like, like you can make an argument.
It's not close.
I think you can make an argument for both.
It's not close. John Elway was far superior to Steve Young. You can even ask Steve Young that, and he would tell you John Elway's better. I would say Dan Marino was better than Steve Young, but he's got no Super Bowls. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into football.
Okay. And this is for random sake. So who's better then, Phillip Rivers or Eli Manning? Because I would say Eli.
I would say Eli.
Is it because of the Super Bowls?
No, I would say it's because he was a better playoff player. Like if he was, I mean, like that's just facts. You can't argue.
He was terrible outside of the 2 years they won the Super Bowl.
But he was clutch when they needed him to be clutch. And those two, that's what single-handedly gives him the edge over Phillip Rivers. But let me get back to my original point.
Okay.
Mahomes is the greatest quarterback to ever throw a football in terms of the entire package to do everything well. He's got the arm of Favre. He's got the mobility of somebody like Russell Wilson. He's got the ability to read defenses like Brady. He's great at the line like Peyton was. I mean, he's got the accuracy of Drew Brees. Mahomes is like a career 68% completion guy. He's literally a build a QB on Madden. That is the person you would build. But I think that this goes without saying. He doesn't have the best career yet, right? He doesn't have the best career yet. Tom Brady has the best career. I mean, we could also argue this.
It's only 5 years.
Robert Ory's got 8 rings. Nobody ever discusses him. His NBA career is phenomenal. Same with Steve Kerr. Like, I mean,
Okay, but the Steve Kerr argument is a completely different argument because it's like he's got rings as both a player and a coach.
I get it. But Robert Ory actually has 8 rings as a player. No one discusses him. And he was an all-star. Don't get it twisted. He wasn't some guy riding the bench. This dude was like an 18-8, average guy for his entire career. But nobody talks about him being the greatest of all time. So we need Patrick to win more rings. That's for certain. In order to crown him as the GOAT, cemented in legacy, the way we talk about Michael Jordan, he has to win at least 2 more. At least 2. And once he gets to that 3rd ring, I think he's cemented and I think he's done it. Here's what I will say, though. with the way that the game is played today and how many good because back in the 80s and the 90s, there were maybe what? Three or four good quarterbacks that played, right? Guys that you would consider these are the best quarterbacks. There was like 4 of them.
Right.
Now in today's, they're everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere.
I'd say they're everywhere in the AFC. Like they're sprinkled everywhere in the AFC, and the guys in the NFC are good, but they're good.
Well, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Lamar. I mean, I don't think Deshaun is ever going to get back to the place that he once was, but for a long time,
where he was.
But for a long time, Deshaun was considered a top 6, top 7 QB in the league. So there's 5 guys that can rival, and I put loose air quotes around that, rival Mahomes and sneak out some wins. John Elway never had to deal with guys like that. I mean even Brady
in conference,
but even in Brady for a long period, the only 2 guys that he actually had to compete with were Peyton and Ben Roethlisberger, and that was it. I mean,
right.
and Ben wasn't even close to a rival of Tom's. It was Peyton versus Brady, and that was the main rivalry. And it's going to be Mahomes versus Burrow, but Allen is no slouch. We've seen what he can do. Lamar, when fully healthy, wins MVPs. Justin Herbert is fully coming into his own, has broken every record for a guy his age, including Patrick Mahomes. So we're looking at the golden age of quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm really excited for where it's going. But yes, in terms of best player to ever throw football, that best player to ever put on pads and call himself a quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, I believe, truly stands alone.
Well, I'll say one thing that for all you WWE fans out there, the cream rises to the top. Well, here's the thing about Mahomes that I think most people are going to forget, and this is something that the Chiefs are very smart about, and this is something that I can attest to their front office. They were talking today about writing Joe Burrow a blank check. They're talking about paying Burrow all this money, and Joe Burrow's so good, and Joe Burrow's doing all this, and I get it, they're 5th most in cap space. But if you look at any team going forward, if you are paying a quarterback more than Patrick Mahomes, you are doing something wrong. If Patrick Mahomes is number 1 in the entire league, he should set the standard of what they are paid. He's getting $50 million a year. If you continue to go into this further hole of, well, we're just going to keep giving him as much money and the salary cap is just going to keep going up. We're going to just try to keep pumping, numbers up for quarterbacks. I get it. It's now a quarterback driven game. But at the end of the day, you have to look at it and go, if we're paying the quarterback and they don't have the pieces, look at what look at what happens with the Ravens. We saw how poor they played because you took Lamar out and they had no weapons.
If you're paying a quarterback, and I will say this, and I truly mean this, if you're paying a quarterback more than $40 million a year, I don't care who it is, it could be Patrick Mahomes, you're not going to win a championship. You just won't.
But the Chiefs are about to do it. So
Patrick was already up at like 45, 48 million a year, and then he restructured his deal. So Patrick's only getting paid like 41. Like I'm
correct, but that's the nature of it, because they gave him like a baseball contract and said, "Hey, we know you're going to stay. We're going to win a lot of football games with you here, and let's be just absolutely phenomenal. We're going to pay you a bunch of money. We're going to have it set up to where the next contract they can give him a stupid amount that they're like, hey, you won the entire front load of your career. Let's make you even more money now." I just feel there are too many people as the game continues to progress, because now you look at guys like Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott and Jimmy G and Aaron Rodgers and how much money they're getting paid, and their teams are not doing anything with it. That's why the Packers are moving on from Aaron Rodgers, because they're paying him so much money. And what happened? They missed the playoffs.
This is what I'm saying. I'm saying,
But I fear that in terms with the Bengals. If the Bengals front office does typical Bengals front office moves like they could, because the life long term of the Bengals has been a terrible organization, there's a real chance that they can screw this up.
here's what I would do if I were Joe Burrow. If I'm him and I say, look, I don't want the most money in the league because obviously I want the pieces around me to compete I mean, if you want to keep guys like, we don't think T. Higgins is going to stay. Bears just entered the chat right here. You're going to have to take a pay cut. I don't necessarily know that you have to take a cut of pay, but Burrow could easily be, and I think we both agree on this. He could easily be a $55 million a year quarterback in terms of what the Bengals are willing to pay. He'd be smart to say, look, I'll take $40 million a year, add another 2 years onto my contract and make all of it guaranteed. Now, all of the guaranteed money, it's a big risk, right? But we saw Deshaun get it in Cleveland. So I would just say, in order to make this work for the both of us, I need to be taken care of on my back end. I also want to take care of this organization on the back end. So give me a 6-year extension, make it $40 million a year, and call it fully guaranteed, make it $240 million a year, done. And that is how you get around all of that, because then you still have guys like Jamar that you can re-sign. He's going to want a max extension. T. Higgins, he's going to want his max extension. They're not going to give it to him, but he'll want it to keep a really solid number 3 like Tyler Boyd. Got to do the same thing. So, like, quarterbacks taking all this money, like, it doesn't work. We've seen it time and time again. How did Tom win all of those championships other than having Bill Belichick go out and find, Dumb and Dumber, from University of wherever, and turn them into these amazing players, or really solid players, I should say, like Chris Hogan. And the answer is they were able to get more pieces and sign more players because Tom was like, hey, I'll only play for $32 million a year. I'll play for $35 million a year. So that's how winning is done. And that's how Patrick kind of started to like trend towards. He said, hey, you know what? I'd like to take a little bit back so we can sign another player, especially with all the injuries that you're getting. You need to take that pay cut or restructure your deal so that you can compete for these championships.
Yeah, I think it just kind of bogs the question of, why are you playing the game? Are you playing the game to win, or are you playing the game to get paid because it's your job? I think that comes down to the ultimate question. I think you see there are guys in the league that I don't care about winning championships. There's a lot of guys like that in the NFL. They're like, dog, it's a paycheck. It's my job. It's what I've done my entire life. I'm setting myself up for the future. I'm getting as much money as I can. Makes sense. I love it. But in Joe Burrow's case, if it's, hey, I want to win a bunch of games, I want to win a bunch of championships, you're going to need to take a pay cut. And I think this is the year that the Bengals kind of got a chance. Like they're on some decent footing here. If they do it correct, if they do it correct, being the 5th most cap space, if they do it correct, the Bengals theoretically should be right back in the AFC Championship game next year.
Correct. And let's not get it twisted. If my boss came to me and we were suddenly making, 10 times the amount we were here at the radio station, and my boss said, hey, listen, in order to get more pieces around us to really build this station, we're going to have you take a pay cut. How does $100,000 a year sound? Oh, sorry. Like, no, you know what I mean? Like, exactly. I can't do it. Let's not get it twisted.
Oh no, I'm only getting $35 million a year instead of 45.
Sorry. I'm only getting paid $39.5 million a year. Woe is me. You're still one of the richest athletes in the entire world.
I'm not going to be able to show up in all my fancy suits that were given to me for free.
Oh wait, yes you can. So let's get into our final topic. We've got about 10 minutes to cover this. So obviously we mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of scrutiny right now against the NFL referees for a lot of blown calls. There were at least 3 that were just egregious. Number 1 was the block in the back. Number 2 was the roughing the passer no call. And then there was one more holding call that wasn't called against the Chiefs when they were on offense. That one was a little bit more of a ticky-tacky one. I think it was still a hold. It falls under the definition of a hold if you wrap your arm around a guy's neck. But at the same time, like you were saying earlier, yes, we swallow the whistle in the playoffs because we want to see the continuation of play. We want to see good football. At the same time, I think far too many of these games are coming down to giving the fans the ability to say, the refs blew it. You know what? And it is not that they're blown calls, because blown calls happen in every game. Even the dumbest of fans understand that. What is my problem is it's the timeliness of these calls. There has to be a system put in place, a sort of checks and balances of the NFL, where the New York can call in and say, that's got to be reviewed.
That's already in place, and you've seen that a lot more in these playoffs, and that's where over the last 2 weeks you've seen a lot of really good officiating, because now with the whole like the immediate review thing, the NFL is now doing it to where they're having this little conference of the officials, and they're able to change a call because someone's in their ear saying, "Hey, that's not a catch." Like, "Hey, it's clear and obvious. That's not a catch. Let's speed this up. Like, hurry up, call it. Hey, come together, call it a no catch, and let's move forward with the game. We're not going to stop the game. We're not going to go bring out the tablet. We're not going to have you review it. And then we're going to look at this and then go from here and there and there." And it's like the NFL has done a really good job at speeding up the game and making that process a lot faster. That's already starting to be incorporated, and that's already starting to work. I don't think you need to do it on every single flag call, because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, one flag missed here, one flag missed there. They can start to really add up. At the end of the day, was this just a complete egregious officiating problem? Not really. Like, one or two missed calls, okay, understandable. And like, yeah, we get it. A block in the back call not called at the end of the game. Like, people can look at it. It's like, oh, you shouldn't have called. But like, at the end of the day, if it's not immediately at the point of attack, which is where the officials are meant to look, you can call holding on every single play. You can call pass interference on every single play. You can call a block in the back on almost every single return, both punt and kickoff. So this whole, all the officials are we'd probably be fine in the game without officials to the same degree, and it would be a completely different game that would be semi-lawlessness, and like you would have to have guys police themselves, and it would turn interesting. But at the same time, I think the officials have done a lot better of a job collectively. I think they're getting a lot more calls right on the field, because we also look at it and go, wow, there are some calls that officials in the past would have blown dead and would have never allowed to happen. And so I think the officiating is where there's a lot of room for improvement. They've made some pretty big jumps. And I think the biggest that I will give them credit for, and as most players are probably really, really, really happy with, is the fact that the officials are letting a lot more go and letting things play out and making the call afterwards. So we're seeing this a lot with turnovers. So things that might potentially be an interception, might potentially be a fumble, they're not immediately blowing the whistle dead, because they're allowing the game, hey, this could have been a fumble. That could have been a strip. Hey, that could have been an interception. Let's let it go. We'll decide after. And that's now with this whole conference thing is starting to happen. Hey, no, he was down. We see it on a replay. Let's talk about it real quick. Hey, that was a clear incomplete pass. The ball skipped to him. We didn't see it, but it looked pretty good. It was pinned pretty well. But it's starting to get a lot better, and it's starting to get more efficient. And I just think in the grand scheme, officiating has been drastically better over the years. Yes, script writing is really starting to make its way known. And I think that there are little times where you can definitely look at it. And I think even in the Cowboys-Bucks game, like there were some plays where I was just like, this is script writing. Like, this looks almost rigged to me. At the end of the day, as a player's perspective, I think the officiating has been actually, to a degree, a lot better than it's been in previous years. And I think this is starting to be, they're not as impactful in the game. I think, yes, you can still have those times, but in the whole, I think it's been done a lot better.
There are aspects of the game where I believe, yes, the officials have done a lot better. And certainly when it comes to, like you said, the review of plays, when there's a strip or if there's a catch or a no catch, the officials almost always get it right. There's that very rare time where we'll be like, I don't know how they missed that. And I don't know what, New York was seeing. I don't know what the booth was seeing, but
Well,
we
yeah,
do.
we saw it with the Eagles Niners, the Devontae
Right.
Smith catch.
Right.
But
Well, yeah,
that's on Shanahan not throwing the flag. Like,
correct. My problem becomes we have all of this technology. We have all of these cameras. Everybody can see everything. Players, fans, coaches, refs, everyone can see everything going on at the exact same time. There's always someone watching exactly what it is you're doing on that game at all points. Someone's going to catch it. So if we have all of these different ways to view a play, how is it that when we go back and we look at the instant replay for that block in the back, that they can't tack that play on to the end of the play and say, hey, look, there was a call there on that punt that we missed. We were able to catch it. That's obviously a
because
penalty.
that's going to happen on every single play then. And that's part of the issue with replay. Is it's like when you take replay and you slow it down to a fraction of a second, you look at it in super slow motion, it's like, oh, how did they miss this on the field? It's like because they saw it at 20 times faster than what you did, and it's not in perfect 4K on your on 100-inch screen TV. Like that's why it's not super zoomed in. They're looking at it from 15 yards away, and maybe they've got 20/25 vision, and maybe his arm was a little blurry and the shoulder was blocking where it could have been. Like at the end of the day, like those guys are human. Like we're out here trying to make it seem like refs should be perfect. And if you try to bring instant replay in, we saw that what happens with the pass interference calls. Like if you start to review pass interference calls as you can now for the rest of the penalties, if like that starts to be a thing, we saw how poor that worked out. It's not the right thing. And I think baseball, with how much instant replay they've brought in, at the end of the day, like balls and strikes and calls and no calls, it's part of the game. Like there's going to be a call where like you think a guy was safe versus you think a guy was out, or this should have been this way, or this should have been this way. Like that's the natural ebbs and flows of the game. And I think if you start to make it like we need absolutely perfect officiating, then you're going to start to look at every single game going back in history as it would have had a completely different result if you really looked at it in instant replay or break everything down in super slow-mo and look at it right. It's like, then why are they on the field? Then why do we have officials? Then what's the point of the game? And to that same credit, are we going to call holding on every single play? Is every single snap? Are we going to allow holding after holding after holding after holding after holding? And are we going to have any points scored?
Well, okay, then let me rephrase, because I like where you went with that. There needs to be a rule set in place where in crunch time, when yes, because you can't allow these games to be decided.
A touchdown in the first minute is still as valuable as a touchdown in the last minute.
But clearly it isn't, because that's not at all true. No.
If I score a touchdown on my first two drives and I hold, and let's say you score a touchdown on your next drive and we come all the way down to the very, very last drive and I stop you on fourth down on the goal line, did it matter that I scored the 14 points earlier, or did it matter if I scored the 14 points in the last of the game? At the end of the day, the game is 60-minute long. One mistake in the very beginning of the game could lead to a larger outcome. And that's the reason why I say it's like the Chiefs played a more whole game. You look at the first half, the Chiefs played better throughout the majority of it. It's not about late in games. Yes, we get it the last 2 minutes of a game. That's why they go for booth reviews. But this whole notion that a play from the first half is now irrelevant just because it's late in the game, you play the entire game. You don't play the last 2 minutes. You play the entire 60 minutes.
I'm just saying, I think that there have been far too many games in the last few years where we have seen the fans, and obviously, right, like it's one of the main defaults that fanatics go to, and they just say, oh, the refs, because it's the easiest blame deflector. But I think there's some merit to this Chiefs Bengals game that you saw where people said the refs, because there were so many egregious calls at the end of the game, or no calls, that took place where we're like you said, this has got to be, if it leads someone to say the NFL is rigged, there's obviously a mistake going on. There has to be. I mean, because if you had a game where there was one blown call in the first quarter, but then everything else was seemingly within reasonable doubt or reasonable play, no one would say the NFL is rigged. They would say, "Oh, that was a great game played by such and such. That was a great game played by the Chiefs. Or a great game played by the Bengals or the Bills or whomever." But if you have to get to a point at the end of the game where someone goes to Twitter and says the NFL is rigged because XYZ that just happened, there's obviously a problem. I mean,
yes, but I'm just saying, it's like, if you're not in the film room and you don't break down every single play, then you don't understand that it's like, well, this play from the first quarter that should have been a let's say, okay, this was a no call. Like, and we'll use the Eagles 49ers game, for example. That was a huge missed call. Devontae Smith did not catch the ball. So, okay, let's say the refs change that call. Do you think that changes the outcome of the game? Do you think that that play being in the first half determines that game or not? Because let's say they do make the correct call on the field. Let's say that it's, a catch and it's going the other way. But we saw what happened in the rest of that game. The Eagles were the better team.
But I mean, look, Devontae's is a little bit different because we saw that it wasn't a catch, but it was damn close to being one. It was the closest thing you could get to a catch without it actually being one. It was almost like the Des Bryant rule, right? So I'm talking about plays that very clearly there's a problem. There's a flag. There needs to be a flag. There's something wrong. We can all see here. There's a massive crowd reaction where everyone at home is going, where's the penalty? Because here's the thing. Football fans might not understand the ins and outs and the intricacies of the game, but they know what pass interference is. They know what holding is. They know what a block in the back looks like. So here's what I'll say. On plays like that, yes, you're right. You could probably let I mean, there's obviously a lot of discretion that needs to be used. At what point do you exercise this sort of, big brother type attitude where we're going to step in and say, hey, look, we're going to intervene here. New York's going to intervene on the Devontae Smith catch. No, I don't think. I think that's on the onus of the other head coach, Kyle Shanahan, to throw the flag. He didn't. Oh, that's your fault. But I think when it comes to crunch time and you look at it and go, that was one of the worst block in the back missed calls I've ever seen in my life. We've got to take action. And I think that is what I'm getting to. Not every single play. There needs to obviously be this semblance of it's part of the game. It's human error because that's also part of what we deal with. No human is perfect, including these refs. So when there is a blown call, I'm not the first one to go up. NFL's rigged or up. The game's over now because of the refs. But at the same time, when they, like you said, they add up, it snowballs. And eventually, like I told you, and I'm just going to go back to it, if someone has to take to social media or any sort of platform to say the NFL is rigged because of XYZ that just happened in this game, there obviously has to be some internal work done where you have to look at it and go, there's got to be something we can do.
I just think after this game, people make that big statement because it was a miscommunication that happened on that third down play. If that third down play doesn't happen and they don't, basically send the Chiefs offense back out on the field because that third down play never should have happened, I think people don't say that at all, because I think then people look at it and go, there was a missed block in the back call. But at the end of the day, they probably most times go, the punt probably shouldn't have been to the middle of the field and it probably should have had some hang time, or it should have been kicked out of bounds, or it should have been this, or it should, you start to look at all these other reasons. It's like, I get Joe Burrow could have, but was it really passing? Was it really roughing the passer? Do we look at the whole season's work of roughing the passer? Do we look at every single call that was not called? Because I can show you a lot of times that Justin Fields got hit really hard, that Justin Herbert got hit really hard, that Lamar Jackson got hit hard. I can show you a lot of quarterbacks that got hit a lot worse than Joe Burrow did that weren't called. And so I can go, well, I've got a body of work that shows that shouldn't have been a flag. And I get the block in the back. At the end of the day, it's mistakes. And I think it ultimately always boils down to the winner of the game is the one that makes the officials not matter. You can't leave it up to the officials. If you're a batter, you don't leave it up to the umpire on a 3-2 count. A pitch that's close, you're swinging. You're not, saying, that's clearly outside. Well, if it's close, it's going to be called. And that's the difference right now with the NFL. It's like people immediately want to, jump to, oh my gosh, it's rigged. And it's like, everyone's jumping to that because, like you said, they're fans, they're fanatic. They don't understand the game because they're just upset that their team lost. They're not going to break it down and say, oh, well, we were worse on third down. We didn't have as many first downs. We didn't have as many yards. We didn't have any. Like, they're not going to break it down that way. The other issue, you look at some of the talking heads that then come out and go, this is terrible officiating. And it's like, is it really bad officiating? Or to what I just said, it was poor play calling, poor execution, poor offensive line play, poor total play, poor third down play. Like there's a lot of other, and I think the issue is people cling to the ref thing because it takes all the blame away from their team. It's like, no, we're better. It was the refs. And it's like, that's a really age old thing that like people need to just give up on, because we've seen a lot of teams that had atrocious calls that were then flipped the other way. And they came out on the other end of it. So I hear you. I think it's true. I think there are some calls that people look at and they're like, oh my gosh. I mean, we look at 2 years ago with the Rams and the Saints, like,
yep.
Like that was like
I completely agree.
That was just like, people are just like, what? But I mean, at the end of the day, now we look at it and we go, well, I think the Rams were still the better team.
And listen, I will give you this. We'll never know, right? We'll never know. The Chiefs won this game. They won it outright. Mahomes had one of the greatest performances I've ever seen any injured player have in my entire life. I'm just looking forward to 2 Sundays from now. It's going to be a great game.
Can't wait.
All right, we will see you again on Friday where we preview Super Bowl 57. It's going to be a really, really good one. Jalen Hurts and the unsung heroes of Philadelphia, finally with the storybook ending, the Cinderella season, if you will. And then obviously the dynasty with the greatest quarterback to ever throw a football, Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be a wild, wild game. We're going to be here on Friday, 2 p.m. Central. Make sure you check us out on all of our social medias. That's on TikTok. It's also on Instagram at Say It Like You See It Pod. You can also check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Facebook, we can also be found on YouTube. And like I said, anywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. From Fond du Lac and the AirTech Heating Studios in Wisconsin, I will say goodbye for today. Mighty Q in Fargo, was always great debating you. It was a great show.
That it was. And as always, like you said, on socials, both. What's yours, Trace? At
mine on TikTok is Moose Juice Radio. Not Moose Juice Radio. Moose Juice Videos on TikTok.
Juice Videos. That's
Moose Juice Videos. But juice is spelled Joose. It's not spelled like juice. So that is my TikTok. I'm actually close to 100,000 followers. I just passed 97,000.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So we're hopefully going to pass that threshold pretty soon. It's been a while. It's been a couple months since I've gained quite a few. But anyway, like I was saying, we will see you guys on Friday. For Say It Like You See It, this is Trace the Moose Moustakis and Mighty Q Quinn Redmond signing off.